Hi there, Agile friends. Get ready for the World Tour of Agile at the Agile Online Summit 2023. You can join us from October 24th to 26th for a global showcase of cutting-edge Agile practices and insights. Join us at agileonlinesummit.com. This year, we will be featuring some of the best work done around the world and world-class keynotes. You can check all of that at agileonlinesummit.com. But the best part is that your ticket is on us. That's right, it's free to attend and immerse yourself in the world of Agile excellence. Don't miss out on this opportunity to level up your skills and network with peers and industry experts. Mark your calendars and secure your spot at AOS 23 today by visiting agileonlinesummit.com. So get your free ticket or opt for the full digital pass that lets you keep all the conference videos forever and organize, why not, Agile learning sessions at work. You can get the full digital access at agileonlinesummit.com. I'll see you in the conference floor. Hello everybody, welcome to this very special bonus episode where we will be talking about shifting from a non-technical background to a Scrum Master in technical industries, as well as starting up new teams. And we have as our guest today, Ian McGrady. Hey Ian, welcome to the show.
It is a pleasure to be here, and it's so nice to share the same space with you, Vasco, so thank you.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to have you. So Ian started in IT as a co-founder and junior project manager at Blue Lotus Systems Integration and Data Conversion. There he co-authored an internal book about project management, and he's since worked as a Scrum Master in wagering, banking, and healthcare. And another interesting topic in Ian's bio, of course, is that he comes from a non-technical background. He's going to tell us all about that. We've covered some of those shifts from a non-tech to a tech industry in the Scrum Master role. But Ian, how did that transition happen to you? Share that story with us.
Thank you very much. One of my early jobs I got because I could type fast, and that got me into ABC News headquarters in New York City. And one of the first things I wanted to do there, as I set my sights on becoming a journalist, was to meet with the late great anchor of World News Tonight, Peter Jennings. So I set up about 20 meetings with his assistant, and after the first and second got rescheduled, I noticed that they weren't being canceled like nice try, kid, get out of here. I was just being rescheduled. So I already come to the Scrum Master role with a bit of persistence. So basically I showed up to get rescheduled about 20 times. And then wouldn't you know it, one day the assistant's there and she says, "Oh, Peter's waiting for you, go right in." So I had one of the best conversations of my life, 2 hours with Peter Jennings. And in that discussion, he said, "Look, you've made it to the top. You're here at ABC News headquarters. A lot of people spend their whole lives trying to get here. And I'm going to tell you that the best thing about working at ABC News is having worked at ABC News. So you're going to have to get out of here. You're going to have to go somewhere to a small market and earn your chops." And so from there, over time, I started to train myself to write television news using whatever materials I can get my hands on. And then one thing led to another, and I got a job at a small station doing the reverse commute to a small town outside of New York, South Norwalk, Connecticut. I had been there a couple of months when 9/11 happened. And while I was there, I saw that my sensibilities were somewhat different coming from ABC News headquarters. I was familiar with, international and domestic news. And when I got to the local station, my sensibilities were a little off. They were into, very local stories, high school sports, PTA meetings, budgets for the town, things like that, things that I didn't really have command of. But when 9/11 happened, all international news became local news. And so I think because of my background, they threw me to the keys to the building, and I'd already proven myself to be a serviceable writer. So they let me produce segments all day long, as many as I wanted to, interrupt any program. And I did that for about a month. And there I felt like I really earned my way into belonging as a journalist. And later, I became an award-winning journalist, podcaster. And but then one day, right? One day I'm driving down an icy hill in the Pacific Northwest to try to book some guests who were the relatives of a murder suspect. And a friend of mine called me while I was driving, precariously. And he said, "How's your life?" And I said, "Well, it's pretty good. I got 3 or 4 days of work. I'm working for Good Morning America. And I really feel like I'm on the brink of something." And he said, "Look, your life isn't that great. Where's your next where's your next
That's
meal
quite an
coming from?"
introduction, right?
And this is how I became introduced to Scrum Mastering. Exactly. He said, "Where's your next meal coming from? How do you keep a roof over your head this way?" And I just said, I'm just persistent. He said, "Look, you're smart enough. You work hard. Let me tell you about this job." And he lent me the money for the weekend course. I got the certificate. I rewrote my resume and basically interpreted my experience working with small teams in television, very tight deadlines, things
Yeah.
like that. We basically have a daily sprint.
Yeah, exactly. It's like news is the ultimate agile continuous delivery type of setup.
Kinda, yeah, exactly. And not only that, the product is rapidly devalues if you're late. So if you don't make your deadline, basically much of the day is wasted. So I, after 400 resumes went out, I got 3 interviews and my first full-time job as a Scrum Master.
So one of the things that we've often been asked, we even had a couple of shows on the topic, is how do you prepare for those interviews? Now, you did not come from a technical background, but as you just illustrated, the fact that you had worked with tightly knit teams that had very clear deadlines, and those were real deadlines, not imaginary product owner driven deadlines. They were market driven, right? There was a clear sense of loss of value if you were late. And I admire the persistent, but that we already know about you. 400 resumes is a lot of work. But what were the interviews like? So you got those 3 interviews. Like, how did it feel? Like, as you were getting those questions, what were those questions? But how did it feel to answer those questions?
Well, sometimes I was genuinely lost, and the what what helped me win my job was that I was coachable. When basically the person interviewing is an entry level spot, so the person interviewing and I did not lie on my resume. I simply said, this is, my previous work in television. This is how it maps to Scrum and being a Scrum Master. So why don't you take a chance on me? And so they basically tested me until the point I failed. And at that point, the feedback that I got was, look, I tested you up until this question about WIP limits, right? Here, look at the board. Tell me how this team is doing in terms of its overall health. And I kind of had a guess, but I didn't really know at the time. And they said, what we liked about you is not that you knew everything, but when you didn't, you were interested in the answer. You were coachable, and that's what helped me get the job.
And I think you were interested in the answer is a very good quality to have as a Scrum Master, especially because we are not supposed to come up with all the answers. In fact, a lot of the times we come up with questions, right? And then the teams and the stakeholders and the product owners themselves come up with the answers. But as you look at that experience, like, going through that, which I'm sure was a humbling experience to be asked so many questions, and also knowing that you were not yet an expert in the topic, right? So you have to have humility to put yourself in that kind of position, not just persistence. How does that map to your current Scrum Master work? Like, what do you think you've brought into Scrum Master that gave you that opportunity ultimately, but that you brought with you to the role of the Scrum Master?
Oh, well, um, in television and in Scrum, obviously, you got to think on your feet. You got to be interested in in other people. You got to be interested in other things. Like there really has to be like a chemical dynamic between you and the things you don't know. You have to like that. You have to know that that's your edge, and you want to explore that with people who are definitely 100% smarter than you. These people on a development team are people who are generally disposed towards being smart, really smart. And if you're somebody who is uncomfortable being in a room with people who are smarter than you, it's certainly not the job for you. And also, if you're somebody that feels that they have to compete with those people for being the smartest person in the room, it's definitely not the job for you. It has to be a complementary relationship. Now, I don't mean to overly generalize. I'm not saying that all developers are um, deep introverts or geniuses. I'm just saying that you have to like to participate in this exchange and and relish the opportunity to plant seeds that grow with a team.
Absolutely. And how about you? Like, obviously, you come from a different background. How's your life changed since you took up the role of the Scrum Master? Are there any significant differences, some personal growth you identify from that experience?
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, we all know the book "Twice the Work and Half the Time." Now I've got half the work at twice the pay. Uh, Scrum mastering is nowhere near as hard as my previous work in television, and uh, it the deliverables. I mean, how often have you seen a team just like, oh well, we didn't make it. Let's finish it the next sprint. It's really not like that in television at all. When you develop a track record of not meeting deadlines, that's a big mark on your career. So um, I feel that my aptitudes and experience really helped me add up to provide some actual leadership on the team in terms of vision, in terms of being able to hold ideals, to be a principled person. Journalism is everything about principles. So there's a lot that I can contribute to the team. I've learned, and I feel like a civilian. I go to work every day. I don't worry too much about. I really actually feel like I have a future. I feel like I've got a vision for where I want to be in 3 years, 5 years, and I've got a house. I've got a wife and a kid, and there's food in the house, and I have a car that's paid for. I can save 15% of my income in my IRA and still have a good basic quality of life, and that is something I did not have as a journalist.
So, what do you think is when you think about all of those changes and some of them quite life altering? What do you think is, talking to the audience now, the people listening to us, what do you think is the thing that Scrum Masters must bring to their teams to really carry the weight, right? To help the teams. So, from all of that experience, coming from a completely different background in TV news, what is the
Mhm.
message you have for our Scrum Masters out there?
Get out of the way. As a as the as a producer or a journalist, you're trying to get the best out of people, and you're trying to get that to translate into the work. The hand of the producer is all but invisible, and it's the same thing in a Scrum team. A Scrum Master really has to understand the distribution of weight and effort, attention, participation, so that the value from the team coming into the team across the team is maximized. And they do that by being an efficient participant, knowing their role, and really doing their level best to divest themselves from the best work that that team can possibly do. Like, you want to get the team going in the right direction, help them out a little bit with open questions, closed questions as needed. But for the most part, you really want your team to shine. And that means not being the center of the team, not dominating events, not being the loudest voice first, not letting your opinion be the most important one, the first one, the one that poisons the well. Get out of the way. Let these people become, have the best work life experience that they possibly can. Get the best out of them. Let them enjoy their work.
So we're here also to talk about teams and how we can help them get started, right? That was what got us started in our conversation to schedule this episode recording. So let's talk about that. You've done some work on that, on the starting or standing up new teams, right? What are some of the key lessons that you've collected over the years when it comes to standing up, starting new teams?
Thank you very much. What I've learned from team formation events is that it's important to have them, for starters. I think that there is resistance on the part of upper management, because if you just talk with upper management about, look, I'd like to have a team formation event, they will say, number one, they don't know what that is, and number two, what does that have to do with delivering work, right? So, for starters, it's important. I feel that we need to address this as a community to begin to socialize the idea of going through an actual window of team formation with some certain activities. I have four that I learned on a job, and I find them to be reliable and effective. Uh, the audience may find some variation. They might find things to add, subtract. They might already have some of these things in their pocket. But the main thing is that the team formation events produce these artifacts that pay off and are reinvested in over time. So these four events are the creation of a working agreement, creation of a workflow, um, definition of ready, of course, and a definition of done. Now, teams may have these things floating around, but when these things start acting in concert, and these things are really part of the team's life, then become artifacts and documents that can be referred to, so that the team starts to invest in its own identity. They start to, if there's a conflict, you can pull these artifacts out and say, well, this is generally how we've been dealing with this. Do we need to improve this? Or how should we resolve this? And you can make it more about, let's say, an investment in the team than about one person being right and another person being wrong.
I like what you said. So you mentioned four artifacts. I'll enumerate those so that people can get those into their memory, long-term memory, not just short-term memory. So the first was the working agreements. The second was the workflow, correct?
Mm-hmm.
The third was the definition of ready, and the fourth was the definition of done.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that you mentioned these four. Now, of course, we could have different names. Sometimes people use different names for these. But I like that you have these four. And then I really like that you mentioned that if there's a conflict, if there's a disagreement, there's a law in the team, right? And what these artifacts represent the law for that team. And I was thinking that actually, if we think about team as kind of an environment where collaboration can emerge, let's look at it that way, right? Like software is built by teams, therefore they need to talk to each other, they need to work with each other. So collaboration becomes one of the key aspects of our work, right? We want to foster, we want to catalyze collaboration. And if we think about this, the need to create that environment, and you need to start thinking, okay, so we need a language for this, right? Like, how do we talk about collaboration? And maybe we just use stuff that is already out there. Maybe everybody read a certain book and we use that kind of strategy. There's Lift Off, the book by, I'll check the authors in a second, but Lift Off is a great book that talks about this maturity of team formation, starting new teams, launching new teams, I think is the terminology they use. But there's also this ability to say, hey, actually, this is what we mean by that agreement, like whether it's working agreement or workflow. So there's a continuous improvement possible. The moment you write it down, you can start building this conversation about how do we get better? How do we get better, right? Because we can point at it, right? At least that's my perspective. How about you? Bring us your thoughts. Like, how did you come to this for artifact as being the enabler, let's say, for your work as a Scrum Master?
Well, I'll say parenthetically, to very much in support of your of what you just said, that having separate events, you can have these documents around, and you can build them over time, and they can be useful. But if you do them as an event, what you are basically affording the team to do is to have conflicts in an atmosphere where they're time boxed and there's no pressure to rush to work, so that outlying ideas can be entertained. The people who are usually quiet on the team can have space to participate, and good ideas stand a better chance of not being shouted down uh, by people who say, well, we got to go to work, so let's not do this process for process sake anymore. uh, let's just get to work and figure it out later. Like, that's if you have a time box, if you have a separate event, then that's not really a valid excuse to avoid a conflict. You want to go through those conflicts, as many of them as possible, usefully, before the you hit those crossroads. Um, so there's the real value, is that you can invest in these things early and help head off some conflicts and even bad habits that can set into a team.
So one of the things that we try to do here is, of course, to look at, okay, so how can we help teams, and how do these 4 artifacts that you mentioned and that launch or stand-up event, how does it help the team overcome the most common, let's say, obstacles, factors that eventually prevent teams from achieving maximum value out of the Scrum events? How do you use this concept of standing up event or a launch event and these different artifacts that you mentioned? How do you deliberately use this in order to help the team focus on that, getting the maximum value out of Scrum?
Sure, and I'll just address your earlier question also, which I didn't answer, which is, here's an anecdote. I was brought onto a team, one of the world's largest NGOs, and they were highly bureaucratic. They'd never done anything like team formation, and over the course of 6 months, I got them from 3 to 23 valuable pieces of work delivered per sprint. And that's just because we started focusing on the double loop, not just, gee, what work do we have to do next, but how do we work? So as part of um, the benefit that I get from doing these events, um, you really focus on delivering the promised goods of the Scrum events, right? So if the team is going to say we're going to commit to this full Scrum framework, then great. The Scrum Master's job is to make sure they get the value out of it, so that they want to participate, that they see that that it's, on the one hand, sure, just a framework. On the other hand, if you can go for the value promised by the events, um, you can actually, grease the wheels of the team. So the first thing I find is that if often daily Scrum, a team that I would meet typically is not investing in updating the board live as they work. And I would say, don't just say as a team to update the board 10 minutes before the meeting. Just update it live as you go through the work, because you have distributed teams, you have stakeholders that are looking at it, during a meeting, at night when everybody's asleep and they're trying to make informed decisions. Just update it as you go, so that your daily Scrum becomes not about the stuff that's not on the board, because then the daily Scrum becomes like, oh, update your work items. Oh, it's not on the board, I'll do it later. It doesn't have to be like that. If you have a culture where you're constantly updating that board, you can then focus really on the work and like the bigger questions for the team. Um, Second is focus daily Scrum on doneness, not, what was I working on yesterday? What am I working on today? And what am I working on tomorrow? Change those questions. Get it to, what did I get done? What did I actually finish that is valuable yesterday? What did I actually finish that is valuable today? Or what do I intend to finish today? And what do I intend to get done by tomorrow? If you can't do it, then maybe and if you find within 3 days your work items, you can't get a single thing to done, maybe your work items are too big. The third thing is that a team that doesn't invest in backlog refinement, adequate backlog refinement, winds up doing it anyway. Usually, inadequate refinement, the symptom of inadequate refinement time is that backlog refinement creeps into planning. So as a result, you get inadequate refinement, And you also get bad planning because refined work items take time. You hit refinement before planning in order to let the items mature, to let the idea of the work mature, to resolve, dependencies, conflicts, things like that. Make sure you're not presenting any new conflicts. You want to make sure that these things have time to get into the mind of the team. And then, so first, once you start investing in adequate refinement, it's painful because it's more work than anybody ever realized. But then you start, if you can get a team to stand on 2 or 3 sprints of work, then and the team not only gets the efficiencies that they start to get efficiencies in backlog refinement, but they start to find the synergies in the work items and pulling work together in ways that deliver value faster. Without without adequate refinement, I think a team is honestly um, uh, lagging.
And that's definitely one of the practices that we need to bring straight into the work agreement discussion, and even the workflow, right? Like what are the steps that the work goes through from whatever ideation, whatever that step might be called, until it's out in the market. Uh, I would like us to focus on a specific example, a case study, Ian. So share with us a specific case study. Like let's go through how this starting up work that you do as a Scrum Master can unlock the team's potential and maximize the value from the Scrum event. So share with us a story. Tell us what was the context. How did you set up the startup event, and then how that paid off later?
Sure, and it wasn't without headaches. The so I got onto a team with 4 very talented people, and I find that teams always have very talented people, but the team itself is not very talented at being a team. So um, the first thing I had to do was get buy-in from my boss. And I said, "Look, I want to dedicate some time to doing these events." And I got major pushback. I said, look, these are an hour and a half. And he said, cut them down to an hour. I really am, this is really not a great idea. But we went through them. And eventually this team of 4 people went from producing 3 completed work items per month, and generally spinning their tires most of the time. Again, because they were partly focused on, I'm working on this, I'm working on that. We're not focused on doneness. Um, their If you look at their velocity chart, it is now normally velocity is, not a sexy metric. We as Scrum Masters, we generally poo-poo velocity. We say, look, it's just, a point of discussion. But in the case of a team that cannot produce, having a North Star metric of done work out the door can really help focus attention to getting done work out the door. So this team has a beautiful velocity that is very meaningful for them. Goes straight up from 3 items to 20, 23 items per sprint over the course of 6 months.
And I imagine that there were specific aspects of that startup event and the startup work you did that really helped the team. So you mentioned already one, so focus on doneness, and I imagine you guys talked about it as you were discussing the workflow and the team agreements. But what are some of the other aspects that came from that startup event that helped the team really kind of shift gears, as it were?
Sure. Often, sometimes one of the hard questions is who is on this team? And there was a very talented person that had been assigned to the team and would pick up some work building a pipeline, and then would sort of float over to another team and just do that, and then float over another team and just do that. And everybody was happy with their work. My boss especially, but my team was not, because we needed somebody predictable. And the work was coming to us, but the person was not. So my team had to learn to take a stand and say, look, we need this person here with us. We have an interest as a team. And the team started to own discussions from the team's point of view and think about how well it does its work, and not just individuals sort of out to make sure that they've checked off their box for the day.
Yeah, absolutely. I can totally see that. I have a blog post where I talk about the concept of one team, one goal, right? Like, and one team starts right there, right? Like, you need to know who's on the team, because if you go to Jeff and Jeff says, no, I'm not working on this team this week, I'm in that project with Mary, so no work for me this week. Like, then you don't, who do I pass the ball to, right? Imagine a basketball game where you would go to the court and you would look around and everybody would be wearing a random jersey. Like, who do you pass the ball to? Who's on my team, right?
And also, once you start focusing, on transparency in general, it becomes clear that the team can be interested in who's delivering and who is not, and why. So it becomes a lot easier to have those discussions when norms, guidelines, strengths, weaknesses are transparent. We can say, look, we know you're supposed to be good at this. And as a team, we agreed that we deliver this work to the organization. What is the obstacle here? It becomes a lot easier to have that conversation when it's not just, let's say a team lead who is always complaining about somebody. You can actually have the conversation as a team and support that team member in stepping into their role better and removing obstacles and not having secrets that prevent people from working. Like, they have some obstacle, like their internet doesn't work well because they're in a certain part of the world.
So let's
their
talk
laptop
about those challenges. There's those challenges that come from the team, but there are also challenges that either we bring or they come to us when we are trying to set up this team formation or team stand-up event. So what are some of the challenges you think Scrum Masters need to be ready when starting to bring in these events and helping the teams to go through this startup phase?
The greatest challenge that I've seen is a buy-in, basically from everybody. Because the minute you say something like team formation, I think most people's eyes water over, because it can sound a little cringy. It can sound a little self-involved, but so you can get pushback from senior management. They may ask you to define what it is. They may ask you to prove that somehow this team is going to deliver more value as a result of these team formation events. In order for a Scrum Master to make that case, they're going to have to get some buy-in from their team first. They're going to have to say, look, my team is interested in doing this because we have certain persistent issues that we need to uproot. And if we have these events, we can sort of address a lot of them at once. And not only that, but we can eliminate lots of conflicts of the same type that just keep coming up over and over and over again. So now we can start focusing on getting to a high performing team a little sooner than going through a sort of, call it an organic growth curve where you just stumble over each other for a long period of time. You can try to uproot some of that and get that done early.
And one of the things that I very often get confounded by is this idea that somehow teams will get better without us effectively and deliberately working on it. And when you think about sports teams, like, no one would agree that the coach is a better player than the players on the field. But nobody would imagine that the players would play well without the coach, right? Like, how do we make sure that people know what they are trying to do? Like, somebody needs to be thinking about that. If we're busy heads down coding or testing or interviewing users or designing, whatever that is, we don't have time to think of the big picture. We don't have time to look at, what might be some of the dependencies coming up? What team should I involve for the next planning? Like, who should I talk to, right? So it's important for us also to understand as Scrum Masters that it is our job to make sure that those other things are in place. And all coaches will have a talk with the team and explain, this is how I work. These are the things I want you guys to do. Right? Like, these are let's call it the laws of the game, right? And it doesn't need to be the Scrum Master setting those laws. In fact, it's even better if it is the team that does it together with the Scrum Master, obviously. but they need to be there. And I think that's one of the things that I think is so important in this, let's call it the domain of startup, right? Is to understand that we need to set the stage for collaboration to emerge. Like, it doesn't come by accident. It comes by design. Like, there are certain things that need to be in place, and it is our job as coaches and Scrum Masters to make sure that they are in place.
Yeah, some sports stars are just born that way, but no team is born that way.
I think that's a great phrase to summarize the whole point. Thank you, Ian. All right. So what's one resource that you can point us to help those that want to learn more about how to succeed at this aspect of standing up Scrum teams?
Sure. I've got a article on my LinkedIn page. It's just Ian McGrady on LinkedIn. There's two of them. Choose the one that has me in a blue background. I look like Ted Koppel in the picture. And there's an article there that I'll make sure has visibility. And you can look at that and have a discussion there. And I'm happy to help as much as I can.
Absolutely. We'll put the link to the article here on the show notes so that people can check it out without any need to search for it. So, Ian, it's been a pleasure. I imagine people can find you on LinkedIn. Is there any other place where they can go to find out more about you and the work that you're doing?
At the moment, just LinkedIn.
Absolutely. We'll put Ian's LinkedIn page link, of course, also on the show notes. It's been a pleasure, Ian. Thank you very much for your generosity with your time and your knowledge.
Vasco, it's a pleasure and a privilege. Thank you.
We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.